Conan the Barbarian from 1982. Welcome back, everybody. And I'm sure there's at least a handful of people who were hoping I was going to talk about a different movie from 1982, namely Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. But I felt like I just needed a break from Star Trek for a minute, so I hope you don't mind. And I actually think this movie is underrated. When people talk about the best Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, I feel like everyone always talks about The Terminator, or Predator, Commando, Total Recall, True Lies, but Conan is right up there with them as far as I'm concerned. I think it's nearly a perfect movie. It's not quite perfect, but nearly. And it's based on the works of Robert E. Howard. The character originated in pulp magazines from the 1930s. This is a fantasy character that actually predates The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, which I think is interesting. But I have to admit, I'm not super familiar with the source material for Conan the Barbarian. I'm pretty much just a fan of this movie. So if you're watching this and you happen to be a fan of the Conan the Barbarian comics, you might not love this video because I'm specifically going to be sticking to the events of this movie, and I'm not going to be talking about how it differs from the comics. But I think we should just get started. Conan the Barbarian from 1982, directed by John Milius, written by John Milius and Oliver Stone, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, James Earl Jones, and Sandahl Bergman. The movie opens up with a quote from Friedrich Nietzsche, which already feels kind of out of place. I mean, this is a fantasy sword and sorcery movie. Just imagine if Harry Potter opened up with a quote from Rene Descartes. I don't know. It just feels strange. But it is a fitting quote. That which does not kill us makes us stronger. That's kind of the basis for Conan's entire character. It's a philosophy I'm not sure I agree with, but in the case of Conan specifically, it seems to ring true. And there's an opening narration from Conan's chronicler, and he says that he alone can tell thee of this saga. Well, I hope he doesn't mind if I tag in for a bit, because that's kind of what I'm going to be doing. So let me tell you of the days of high adventure. And throughout the opening credits, we see Conan's father forging a sword. And the Conan theme song is playing. And I think the music composed by Basil Poledouris is really amazing. It elevates this movie so much. And after he finishes with this sword, he speaks to his young son, Conan, and he talks about how Crom is his god, and how long ago giants took from him the secret of steel. Crom destroyed the giants for their crime, but he left the secret of steel on the battlefield for men to discover. He also says that there's no one in this world that you can trust, but you can trust your sword. Seems like kind of a lot of shit to throw at a 9-year-old, but okay. And this takes place in the fictional realm of Hyboria. Conan is what's known as a Cimmerian, which I guess is kind of the more politically correct term for barbarian. And Conan lives in a small village with his people, and they suddenly get attacked by a bunch of raiders. Almost the entire village is slaughtered, along with Conan's father, who gets killed by a bunch of armored Rottweilers. Tragic. And the raiders are led by a sorcerer named Thulsa Doom. And what a great hairdo he has. We also get introduced to his two main henchmen, Rexor and Thorgrim. They're basically Thulsa Doom's Bebop and Rocksteady. And Conan's mother is still alive for the moment, and she's trying to protect Conan. She raises a sword in his defense, and for a barbarian, she seems very put together. Compared to Conan's haggard dad, she seems pretty well kempt. And Thulsa Doom approaches her, and he has Conan's father's sword in hand, and he seems to use some sort of hypnosis to get her to lower her sword, and she does. and then he decapitates her. I mean, holy shit. That's a pretty shocking scene, especially for 1982. And the young Conan is just left standing there as the body of his mother is suddenly pulled away from him. Tragic. And Thulsa Doom hands the sword over to Rexor, and he'll have it for the remainder of the movie. And they take the surviving children to be sold into slavery. Needless to say, it's a pretty dark opening. And Conan basically ends up pushing this giant wheel around for the next, 15, 20 years or so, until he morphs into Arnold Schwarzenegger. And you get to see his absurd 1982 physique. And I don't know what this wheel does. I don't know what its purpose is. But it has begun the forging process of Conan the Barbarian. And he seems to have outlived all his peers. He is now the only one pushing this wheel. He then gets sold and put into some kind of underground fighting pits where he eventually excels, but not before making some classic Arnold noises. So, that's nice. And according to the narration, in time, his victories could not easily be counted. And he ends up traveling east where some war masters teach him various fighting techniques. And he was also able to learn how to read and write. And neither of those skills are going to be used in this movie. He was also, and I quote, bred to the finest stock. So apparently they forced him to mate, which I guess means that he has children that we don't know about. Okay. I mean, moving on. And they have some kind of party. And this angry dude decides to give everyone a pop quiz about what's best in life.
But what is best in life? The open steppe, fleet horse, falcons at your wrist, the wind in your hair. Wrong! Conan, what is best in life?
To crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and to hear the lamentation of their women.
That is good.
Probably the most famous line in the movie, Conan basically says that the best things in life are killing dudes and listening to their loved ones cry about it. And I don't know if he actually believes that or if he's just saying what his owners want to hear. And I love how the first guy gives some kind of bullshit answer about what's best in life, like hanging out with falcons and the wind in your hair. And the guy is like, wrong, dipshit. Conan, tell this idiot what's really best in life. Apparently, it's not a subjective question. You either like killing or you're wrong. And this poor dude is just left sitting there like, oh, well, fuck me for liking falcons, I guess. And sometime later, Conan's owner just decides to free him. No real explanation is given for this, but hey, it allows the movie to happen, so that's good. And Conan makes a run for it. And he is chased by some dogs. I guess maybe the other slave guys take issue with his escape. I don't know. I don't know why he's being chased. And he ends up falling into a cave, and he makes some more great Arnold noises. I don't know about you, but I love the completely inhuman noises that Arnold makes. I never get tired of it. And after he collects himself, he discovers a tomb filled with ancient warriors from a long-dead civilization known as the Atlanteans. His skeleton is sitting on a throne, and he has a sword in hand. I don't know why these guys just died sitting around like this, but they did. And Conan slowly takes the sword. It's almost like he's afraid the skeleton will come alive and attack him. And frankly, I wish that would have happened. This movie is great, but at times it feels like it does lack some of the more magical elements that you would typically see in a Conan the Barbarian story. And I think that's one of the few things that the sequel actually does better than the original. In any case, he now has a sword, and it's all corroded and dirty, and all he does is smack it against the ground, and it's like it's brand new. Pretty sure that's not how it works, but we'll accept it. And the Atlantean sword is one of the most iconic movie swords of all time. I've always loved it, and I kind of want one. I would use this sword for home defense, because anyone can have a gun, especially in America, but a dude with a sword is nuts. You don't want to mess with him, especially if it's the Conan the Barbarian sword. Anyway, I'm rambling. And he begins his travels. He ends up running into a very strange woman who offers him a place to stay.
There's warmth and fire. Do you not wish to warm yourself by my fire?
I mean, that right there is pretty suspicious, is it not? Just the way she says it. Do you not want to warm yourself by my fire? It's just really strange. And she says warmth and fire. I mean, in this world, if you have warmth, you have fire. If you have fire, you have warmth. So already I'm seeing red flags, although I suppose warmth could mean something else. And it does, as we'll soon see. But Conan accepts her offer, and she throws some fucking cocaine on the fire. As you do. And I like how it startles Conan. And he kind of questions her. He describes the symbol of Thulsa Doom, two snakes facing each other, and she's willing to give him information, but there's a price, and that price is sex. She wants Conan to have sex with her. What a life. So they have sex, and she weirdly gives him the information he needs while they're having sex. She tells him to go to Zamora, and then things get really kinky when she turns into a deranged succubus. A fuckubus, you might say. I mean, what is happening here? Have you or your partner ever turned into a mythical creature while having sex? It sounds fun in theory, but it's certainly not fun in this situation. Conan throws her into the fire, and then she turns into some kind of spectral phantom and goes flying around the room before leaving the hut. And Conan's expression is about the same as mine. I mean, what the fuck did we just watch? I did ask for more supernatural fantasy elements in this movie, and I guess I just got it. And then Conan just kind of stays in this hut overnight. Like, I would have left so fast. But he's just like, well, that was weird. But I'm exhausted. I gotta get some sleep. And he heads out the next day, and he meets a prisoner who was being held captive by the former occupant of this hut. And Conan asks him a question.
Who are you?
I don't know why he had to ask it like that, but it is a fair question. And his name is Subutai. He's a thief and an archer, and Subutai is a fun character. As I understand it, he is not in any of the Conan comics, but apparently either John Milius or Oliver Stone named him after one of Genghis Khan's generals. So that's nice, I guess. And they end up traveling together. They share a meal, and they discuss religious beliefs. Subutai says he prays to the four winds, which I'm assuming has nothing to do with the Four Seasons Hotel or the Four Seasons landscaping company that former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani once held a press conference at. Yeah, what a time to be alive. And Conan says Crom laughs at your 4 wins. Crom is strong, and when Conan dies, he will have to go before Crom, and he must know the riddle of steel, or Crom will cast him out of Valhalla and laugh at him, which I think is kind of funny. Like, being laughed at by your god is somehow a fate worse than death. He also says that Crom sits on a mountaintop, which kind of contradicts what his father said at the beginning of the movie. He said Crom lives in the earth. So which is it? Is he on a mountain or is he in the earth? I don't know. But Subutai scores a point by saying that his god is the open sky and Conan's god lives underneath him. And Conan's facial expression indicates that he considers that to be a valid point. He doesn't like it, but he seems to concede. It's interesting that a barbarian and a thief in a fantasy realm just had a civilized debate about religion that didn't turn violent. We could learn a lot from these guys, don't you think? And they eventually make their way to some sort of city. I'm assuming it's Zamora. And they ask around about Thulsa Doom's sigil. And one guy tells them about a snake cult that practices in town out of some place called the Tower of the Serpent. And before doing anything about it, they decide to get real drunk. Conan calls a bunch of prostitutes sluts, and then he punches a camel. And why he does that, I'll never know. But the locals don't seem to like it very much. This camel is obviously a very well-respected individual around here, so they decide to leave. They come back sometime later to try to sneak into this tower, and when they do, they run into this person. Her name is Valeria, and she's planning on robbing the place. And since Conan and Subutai don't even have rope to climb up the wall, they decide to tag along with her. They sneak in and steal some valuables, and Conan takes a big gemstone called the Eye of the Serpent. And Rexor is here, and he seems to be conducting some kind of bizarre ritual sacrifice. And Conan notices the symbol of Thulsa Doom, and it clearly brings back some memories. He then gets attacked by a giant snake, which looks like it's right out of the 1997 classic Anaconda, starring Jon Voight, who was doing the world's worst Razor Ramon impersonation in that movie. See, I shouldn't have said that, because if I ever do a video for Anaconda, I can't use that joke again. But I probably will anyway. In any case, Subutai and Conan make quick work of the snake, but it hasn't gone unnoticed. They've been discovered, so it's time to leave. And some girl jumped into the snake pit as part of some kind of warped Midsommar-style sacrifice, only to find that Conan has killed the snake. It's kind of hilarious. That's a lesson in looking before you leap. And there's a mad scramble. Conan, Subutai, and Valeria fight their way out, and they escape to the roof. And Valeria says, "Do you want to live forever?" which is kind of her catchphrase. And then she jumps off the roof into a pool below. The others follow, and they make it out safely. And the 3 of them decide to celebrate their successful robbery by getting drunk, naturally. And Conan hooks up with Valeria. And Conan knows she's special because she did not turn into a horny chupacabra. They also sloppily eat some chicken and start making out. I mean, it's just, I'm not thrilled with that. And neither is the chicken. And after that's over, they go back to getting drunk. Conan eventually passes out face first in his horrendous-looking porridge. He might have died right there if a group of soldiers didn't walk in and arrest them. And it's kind of funny that Valeria tries to wake up Conan and he just falls over. And she takes her sword out like she's ready to go, even though she's clearly in need of some ibuprofen and some Gatorade. They end up taking them to see a king named Osric the Usurper. He was once a powerful Northman, not unlike Conan himself, but according to the narrator, he's now old and sodded. And he's played by Max von Sydow, and it's always great to see him. And he's pretty pissed. He explains that Thulsa Doom is becoming a big pain in the ass for him. Snakes have invaded his city. And Osric also says that Doom has put a spell on his daughter. She follows Doom as if she were his slave. And he wants Conan and his companions to get her back. He wants them to do it because, so far, they're the only ones to stand up to Doom. So he basically offers them a ton of rupees from Hyrule and tells them to go rescue his princess. And they consider their options in private. Valeria just wants to take the money and run. She says they have everything they could ever need. Conan seems to think about it, but he looks at the symbol of Doom and he realizes that he has to do it. But he doesn't want to endanger Valeria's life when she's not fully on board with this. So the next day, he leaves without Valeria or Subutai. And he leaves behind the Eye of the Serpent as a parting gift. He ends up traveling pretty far, and he comes across the ruins of an Atlantean battle. And he meets the narrator, who is a wizard named Akiro. He calls himself a wizard, but he's a wizard in the same way that Dr. Phil is a doctor. And he kind of threatens Conan, but Conan just laughs at him, and Akiro begins to laugh too. And over a fire, he tells Conan about this place. It's called the Mounds. And it's been here since the time of the Titans. It's apparently a very magical place. And Conan continues his journey. He rides a camel, so I guess he's learned to stop punching them, although in the next movie, he punches another one. So I don't know what the fuck's going on. And he comes across a village that worships Thulsa Doom. Some members of Doom's cult also show up, and Conan kind of flirts with one of them, and he gets him alone, and he tells him that he's shy, and then he knocks him out and steals his cult outfit, as you do. And he gets very close to the Temple of Set, where Thulsa Doom is giving a speech to his brainwashed followers. Osric's daughter is also there. But unfortunately, Rexor and Thorgruff discover Conan. They beat him and bring him to Thulsa Doom. And Doom accuses Conan of killing his big snake and stealing the Eye of the Serpent. All true. But Conan responds by saying this.
You killed my mother. You killed my father. You killed my people. You took my father's sword.
It must have been when I was younger.
So it's fair to say that whatever Conan has done to Thulsa Doom, it pales in comparison to what Thulsa Doom has done to Conan. And I like how Doom doesn't even really remember it. Like, he says, it must have been when I was younger. Well, no shit. Anything that happened in the past happened when you were younger. And his response kind of reminds me of the M. Bison's Tuesday quote from the Street Fighter movie, although obviously not quite as over the top. And apparently, Thulsa Doom used to go around stealing weapons. He used to be intrigued by steel, just as Conan is. And Doom asks if Conan knows the riddle of steel. And he answers for Conan by saying that steel isn't strong, flesh is stronger. He points to one of his thralls and says this.
That beautiful girl.
Come to me, my child.
That is strength, boy. That is power. The strength and power of flesh.
So he's saying, in a very sick and twisted way, that steel is nothing compared to the hand that wields it, which is essentially the correct interpretation of the riddle of steel. I don't know why someone had to die for him to make that point, but what can I say? He's a real bad guy. And then Doom chastises Conan for wasting the strength that he gave him. He's basically saying that by killing his family and village, he made Conan a powerful warrior. Essentially, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And he decides to make Conan contemplate this on the Tree of Woe. The Tree of Woe? Bogus. That was a little crossover 80s movie pun. You're welcome. And basically they crucify Conan. Tragic. He is nailed to this lone tree in the middle of nowhere, and he gets attacked by a vulture, and he bites it until it's dead, which is fucking insane, especially since they apparently used a real dead vulture that had been stuffed. So Arnold is chewing on an actual dead animal in this scene. I mean, Ozzy Osbourne must have loved this fucking movie. And eventually, Subutai and Valeria come along and rescue Conan. How they found him, I'll never know. I'm guessing they followed him and came across Akiro, who told them the direction he was headed. And they take him back to Akiro. He says he can heal him, but the spirits of the mounds will extract a heavy toll, and Valeria says she'll pay it. He also tells her that these spirits will try to take his soul as he recovers. So they perform some kind of strange ritual, and some ghosts show up, and they try to attack Conan. But Valeria fights them off. And in the morning, Conan wakes, and Valeria says this to him.
All the gods, they cannot sever us. If I were dead and you still fighting for life, I'd come back from the darkness, back from the pit of hell, to fight at your side.
Jesus, why is that like the most romantic line I've ever heard in a movie? I mean, it's pretty hardcore. And Conan has now been crucified and essentially resurrected. So, happy Easter, everybody. And now that he's fully recovered, he practices some fancy sword moves, and the Conan theme song is playing. It looks epic. It feels epic. It is epic. And the trio decide they're going to rescue the princess. But more than that, they're going to kill Thulsa Doom. They find one of Doom's settlements. It's called the Mountain of Power. They put on some war paint, and it seems to serve no purpose other than looking cool, and they sneak inside. They find that Thulsa Doom's people are engaging in a cannibalistic sex orgy. How nice. And some guy is stirring up some green slime from Double Dare mixed with human body parts. Nothing like some fresh Soylent Green, am I right? And it's at this point, Thulsa Doom turns into a giant snake. And it's a pretty cool special effect, but once he is a snake, he just kind of slithers away. I don't know whether he knew Conan was coming or what, but he escapes just in time. And I have questions. Does that mean the snake that Conan killed earlier was like a guy? I mean, what the hell are these giant snakes? Who knows? And Subutai kills the guy who is cooking up the human shamrock shake, and Conan dumps it over. Tragic. And the battle begins. Valeria grabs the princess, who is not willing to be rescued, so she has to tie her up. The princess is a real pain in the ass in this movie. And Rexor and Thorgrump show up. Whatever the hell his name is. And Rexor is genuinely terrified of Conan. And why wouldn't he be? He crucified this guy a couple days ago. He should be dead. But here he is. He's here, and he's looking like something between a raccoon on steroids and just straight up death incarnate. And Conan takes both of them on, and Thorgrouch knocks down a massive statue with his Mjolnir that he bought off Etsy, and it nearly kills Rexor. And Conan, Subutai, and Valeria make their escape with the princess in tow. But Valeria is lagging behind, and she's confronted by 4 guards, and she kills them all pretty easily. You know, people always talk about the great women characters in fiction from the 80s. You know, Ripley, Sarah Connor, Princess Leia. But it seems like Valeria is a little forgotten in that shuffle. And I'm not sure why. because she's awesome in this movie. And Doom shows up. He's pissed about what just happened. He walks outside the palace and he sees Conan and company riding away. So he takes out a live snake and somehow straightens it into an arrow. I mean, what did he give this snake a Viagra? Why is it like this? He fires it and it hits Valeria. She's hurt badly and they have to stop. Conan rips the snake out of her and throws it away. And Valeria knows she's dying. She knew she'd have to pay the gods, just as Akira told her. And she tells Conan to kiss her. She says, "Let me breathe my last breath into your mouth," which is a little gross, but it's also kind of awesome. Everything she says in this movie is over the top and epic. But unfortunately, she dies. Truly tragic. They take her back to the mounds, and they make a funeral pyre for her. Akira says fire won't burn up there, but it does. It does for her. And now Conan wears the eye of the serpent around his neck in memory of her. And they know it won't be long before Thulsa Doom comes after them, so they decide to make their stand here at the mounds. They use the princess as bait, and I'm not sure Conan even cares about bringing her back to King Osric at this point. And they set up all sorts of traps. They wear the armor of some of the dead Atlantean soldiers. Their skeletons are all over the place, and there's somehow a horse skeleton that is just standing up. So the horse and the rider died while the horse was standing, and it just stayed that way? They died like a glitched out video game NPC. I suppose there's worse ways to go out. And they wait for the impending battle. Conan prays to Crom for the first time in his life, and it's pretty legendary.
No one, not even you, will remember if we were good men or bad, why we fought or why we died. No. All that matters is that two stood against many. That's what's important. Balor pleases you, Crom. So grant me one request. Grant me revenge. And if you do not listen, then the hell with you.
Pretty iconic. Conan does not have a lot of dialogue in this movie at all, but when he does speak, it's great. And that prayer almost reminds me of Pedro Serrano's prayer to Jobu in the movie Major League.
Pissed off now, Jobu. Look, I go to you. I stick up for you. You no help me now. I say, fuck you, Jobu. I do it myself.
Same energy. And the battle begins. Conan and Subutai make quick work of the bad guys, mostly because they're strategically inept. I don't know how 15 guys on horseback are losing to 2 guys, but it's happening. Although Subutai gets stabbed in the asshole by a spear, tragic. He probably would have died, but Akira jumps in and saves him. And Thor shit shows up looking for Conan, but he walks right into a trap and gets impaled. And Conan just kind of stands there watching him die. Kind of like Michael Myers when he pinned that nerd to the wall. But he stares at him a little too long because Rexor sneaks up and attacks him. And it seems like he has the upper hand against Conan. But then this happens.
Do you want to live forever?
So Valeria said she'd come back from the dead to fight at his side, and she wasn't kidding. And I always loved her line, "Do you want to live forever?" Because I think what she means when she says that is, do you want to be a legend? Do you want to live forever through your great deeds? Maybe that's obvious, so it's stupid of me to even mention it, but that's how I always interpreted it. But she unfortunately disappears, and Conan continues fighting Rexor. He has the upper hand now, and he slaughters him in epic 80s fashion. And it's perfection. And Rexor was, of course, using Conan's father's sword, and it's broken, which is unfortunate because it was a pretty cool sword. And now that all of Doom's men are dead, he decides to try to shoot Osric's daughter with one of his snake arrows. I guess if he can't have her, no one can. But Subutai saves her by blocking it with his shield, and Doom rides away. And later that night, Doom is giving a big speech to the members of his cult. It seems like he's ready to have them all drink the Kool-Aid so he can slither away and start all over again from scratch. And Conan sneaks in with the help of Osric's daughter. I guess she finally came to her senses after Doom's failed attempt to murder her. I guess that's all it took. And he approaches Doom as he addresses his followers, and Doom calls Conan his son. He says, "For who now is your father if it is not me? Who gave you the will to live? What would your world be without me?" So he's basically once again trying to take all the credit for Conan's strength. He also seems to try to hypnotize Conan, but it doesn't work. Conan hacks at Doom's neck several times with his father's now broken sword until he finally decapitates Doom, and he tosses his severed head down the steps of the temple toward the cultists. And with their god now dead, they all just decide to leave, hopefully to live as free-minded individuals, but I'm sure some of them will find another charlatan to worship. And Conan looks very pensive for a while, seems like he's taking it all in, and then he burns down the temple, which seems unlikely since all he did was throw a big ashtray at it, but whatever. And in the epilogue, the narrator says that Conan would continue adventuring and eventually become king by his own hand, and that story shall also be told. Except it wasn't. Tragic. And that's the movie. Overall, it's great. I love this movie. I think I watch it at least once a year. It has become one of my favorite Arnold movies. And it was obviously super popular. There were a ton of low-budget sword and sorcery movies that came out after this, and I think most of them are pretty enjoyable. It's not a perfect movie, though. It is great, but as a fantasy movie, I don't think it does a great job of world building, I guess I would say. It's really hard to gauge what anything is in this world. For instance, how much power does Thulsa Doom actually have? Because it seems like he has about 20 soldiers and a couple hundred cult members. Like, is that all he is? I guess that's possible. And Osric is obviously a king, but what is he a king of? Like, what is his kingdom? We never see it. I'm sure it's budget related, but it would have been cool to see more of a layout of this fictional realm. And I know Arnold was not considered to be a great actor, especially at this point, and that's why he has so few lines in the movie. But I think he actually does a great job conveying things without words. But at the same time, I would have liked to hear him speak more. I mean, he has this close relationship with Valeria, but I don't think he says a single word to her in this movie. I'm not kidding. Like, he never speaks to her, except for when they first meet. He says to her, "You're not a guard." I mean, it really makes it feel like they have a one-sided relationship. I also don't think Valeria should have died. I think Conan has plenty of motivation to kill Thulsa Doom. He doesn't need any more. I think it would have been very cool to see her in the final battle, as more than just a cameo ghost. And James Earl Jones as Thulsa Doom is a great villain. He adds a lot to this movie. And I always thought this movie should have had a final fight between Doom and Conan. But the more I think about it, I think it makes sense. Ultimately, Thulsa Doom is not a fighter. He's a coward. He's a con man. Even his magical abilities are embellished. He's got people believing that he's a god when he's really just a guy with some parlor tricks and snake arrows. And I like that. I like that he goes down like the snake he truly is. No offense to snakes. Doom is very representative of a dictator or a corrupt politician. And there is, of course, a sequel to this movie, which is not nearly as good, but I still enjoy it. I think it was a mistake to make it PG-13. It's not nearly as violent as the first movie, but it does have some cool characters and fun moments. Wilt Chamberlain is in the movie, and he towers over everyone to the point of absolute absurdity. Sarah Douglas from Superman 2 is the villain, and Grace Jones is also a great character in the movie. And Bob the Goon from Batman also has a major role, which is kind of unfortunate because he inexplicably takes the place of Subotai, and he's frankly just not as good. Overall, I think it's fun, but it ended up being forgettable and not too dissimilar from the movies that ended up ripping off the first Conan movie. And there's also a 2011 remake of Conan the Barbarian starring Jason Momoa, which apparently is more in line with the source material. But it's really bad. The less said about that movie, the better. And we're still waiting to see Conan become king by his own hand, or at least see what he would be like as king. I don't think it's too late for Arnold to reprise the role, but the clock is ticking. But ultimately, the original Conan the Barbarian is iconic. It's a really cool sword and sorcery revenge movie, and it's the movie that really kick-started Arnold's career as an action star. Everybody thinks it was Terminator, but it was definitely Conan. But anyway, I think I've yapped long enough about this, don't you think? Let me know what you think of Conan the Barbarian. And until next time, take it easy.